The story follows Jin Kenzaki, a boy who is turned into a half-human, half-machine creature known as a Zetman during a scientific experiment. Jin is forced to live in hiding, fearing the humans who would persecute him for his differences. The story begins with a monologue about the creation of the players, a race of superhuman beings created by a scientist named Dr. Amaji. The players were originally intended to be a peaceful species, but many of them eventually became violent and began to attack humans. The players were initially used as weapons in a war, but some of them escaped killing many humans and were able to blend into society. Kenzaki, a middle-aged man who works in an underground laboratory. Kenzaki runs away with a baby in a capsule, while an old man, Mitsugai, tries to stop him, but Kenzaki escapes successfully. 10 years later, we see a couple walking down the street. The girl is scared of a serial killer in town and wants to go home. While the man is not taking her seriously, suddenly a mysterious man passes by, the man unnoticeably killing him. The woman is left behind, shocked at how such an event can occur in broad daylight. Investigators come and examine the body. A mysterious black car passes by the murder site. An elderly man is sitting in the car with an investigator and says that he wants to find a child with a special mark on his hand. Investigator is worried if the child is still alive or not. The elderly man mentions that the child was actually an immortal devil. Now we see a young boy, Jin Kenzaki, living in the slums with his grandfather. Jin is a street-smart and resourceful kid, and he often helps people in need, even though he often asks for money in return. Jin is secretly a player, but he has no knowledge of his true origins. He spends his days helping people with his friends Kouga Amaji and Konoha Amaji, the children of Dr. Amaji. Jin is about to leave when his grandfather, Kenzaki, stops him and asks him for the phone he forgot in his hand. A woman named Akemi is distressed by a group of attackers. Meanwhile, Jin comes to rescue her in return for 10,000 yen. Jin's friends Kouga and Konoha arrive and pull Jin away because they think that justice doesn't require rewards. Jin shows them a mark on the back of his hand called Angel's Ring and asks his friends to keep this a secret. This is the same mark the elderly man showed to the investigator before. A mysterious man, Seigi, deals with a player who is known as a serial killer and previously killed the man down the street. Jin encounters Akemi again, and Akemi gives him his payment of 10,000 yen. Jin returns home to find his grandfather has been attacked and is on the brink of death. He attempts to seek medical help for his grandfather Kenzaki, but a doctor denies him. He is carrying his grandfather around the city in a shopping cart in stormy weather. He doesn't know what to do. Then he calls his friend Kouga. Meanwhile, Kouga and Konoha are being scolded by their grandfather for having a friend like Jin. Suddenly, the maid comes with Kouga's phone. His grandfather broke his phone. He goes to Akemi's house for help. Akemi took his father to the hospital and doctors declared him dead. Akemi lets Jin stay with her for the night, and they bathe together. While they are in the bath, Jin asks Akemi what it means to be dead. He tells her that he wants to see his grandfather again, and he breaks down in tears. Akemi comforts Jin and tells him that she will always be there for him. Next day, Jin and his friend Akemi are walking home from shopping when they are attacked by a monster with a long bladed tongue. The monster is one of the players, and it is the same one that killed Jin's grandfather. Akemi is injured in the attack, and Jin stands up to fight the monster, even though he knows he is no match for it. In the end, Akemi sacrifices herself to save Jin, and the monster escapes. Jin is left alone and devastated, but he soon discovers that he has a hidden power. He puts on a ring that his grandfather gave him, and he transforms into a powerful warrior called Zet. Jin wakes up in the hospital and sees an investigator by his side. Investigator tells him about hope and gives him the pendant that belongs to his grandfather. Jin doesn't know the meaning of hope, so the investigator takes him to another room. Jin sees Akemi covered in bandages. She represents his hope, resulting in an embrace between them. Several years later, meanwhile, a serial arsonist has been terrorizing the city. The arsonist is a player, and he is using his powers to set fires and kill people. Seiji is shown conversing with another rampaging player having fire ability. A montage of news reports about a string of arson attacks that have been terrorizing the city. The public is in a state of panic, and the police are baffled. Amaji is having a meeting with other board members, where they discuss growing one larger company. After the meeting, Amaji inquires about the Undertow development project. Meanwhile, a fight breaks out between two homeless individuals. Konoha, a girl distributing food with her mother, tried to stop the fight. When she is about to get attacked in the middle of the fight, a teenager boy steps in and stops the fight. The boy turns out to be none other than Jin with a ring on his hand. He walks away and goes to Akemi, who now works in a stall in an underground laboratory. He is also dealing with the grief of losing his grandfather. Now we see Mitsugai, who is trying to create another Zet-like creature, but fails to do so even with Kanzakai data. In a party arranged by Amaji Corporation, we see Kouga, who is an adult now. Kouga makes a statement to become an ally of justice like Alphas, who is a superhero. He goes out and is determined to catch the arsonist. Kouga dreams of becoming a hero, but he is still struggling to control his own player powers. Meanwhile, Jin comes out of his house for a walk and comes across the arsonist in a building. The arsonist is attacking a group of people, and Jin rushes to save them. The arsonist gives Jin a hard time while Kouga reaches there with his crew. He sees Jin and uses his fire extinguishing spray on the surroundings. They works. Saw a family stuck in a building. Jin throws the family down on the bed to save them. Kouga escapes the scene and unintentionally gains the credit of saving them. Jin still struggles against the arsonist, which ends up activating his Zet powers. Jin transforms into Zet and fights against the arsonist. Zet is more powerful than the arsonist. He kills the arsonist with a single punch and instantly kills him. Jin then escapes the building and falls unconsciously. Amaji asks Kouga to make a press conference and takes the credit of saving the family. Kouga denies. Amaji comes to know that there was a man on the site with an angel's ring on his hand. Konoha takes him to the hospital, where her grandfather Mitsugai identifies him as the baby taken by Kenzaki in the capsule. Jin wakes up and sees Akemi held by a player. Jin shows rage and transforms into Zet to save Akemi. Mitsugai and other scientists keep track of his strength and transformation from outside. He suddenly kills the other player with a single punch as usual. For the first time in his life, Jin saw himself in his Zet form. He breaks the glass of the laboratory furiously. He is traumatized to find that Akemi turns into a player and it is all a trap to measure his transformation. He must kill her. Zet form cannot stand a maniacal living player in the surroundings. One of the armed men of Mitsugai shoots his mother as he fails to kill her. Jin breaks into tears while returning to his real human form. Mitsugai injects him with medicine to make him unconscious and take him to an abandoned underground facility. Here, they explain to him that they made him and Kenzaki was his father. Mitsugai developed some monsters to make money, but of his sin, they made a powerful monster with the power of ring of exposure that can reveal a monster disguised in human flesh. That strong and immortal monster is Jin Kenzaki. When they are leaving, the ring of exposure on the wall begins to resonate with the ring on the left arm of Jin. It shows the indication that they are connected. Mitsugai takes him to the underground stall where Akemi is working. He tells Jin that the Akemi he saw in the laboratory is a monster. Turns out that they made it to test the Zet transformation level of Jin. Jin wants to meet her, but Mitsugai stops him. Jin gets offended. Mitsugai tells him from now on, he should maintain distance from his beloved ones. If he lives with Akemi, she can be targeted by other players. Dr. Amaji asks Jin to join him so that he can stop the evil players from targeting people. Jin accepts his offer as Mitsugai promises to heal off the scar on Akemi's face. He tells him about the final form of Zet. We see Seiji wandering near the abandoned facility. He discovers a broken part of the ring of exposure. He smiles and walks out. 2 years later, the investigators discover another case of serial killing. The killer is turning his victims into sand. In downtown, some players are killing humans. Suddenly, a red-haired girl unintentionally witnesses the whole thing. Killers saw her and she immediately ran for her life. The killers keep on searching for the girl. She hides in a small house, while the men from Amaji Corporation watch the whole scenario from CCTV cameras. Will the girl be able to hide from the killers and save herself? What do you think? Tell us in the comments. Now, in a flashback, Mitsubai conducts various tests on Jin to transform him into Zet manually. Nothing worked. Now, Mitsugai developed a gum called Activation Gum to boost his transformation, but still, the results were not satisfactory. Meanwhile, Konoha and her mother continue to distribute food to homeless people. Amaji Corporation. The colleagues of Kouga imprisoned him with new gadgets capable of helping in various situations on his way back. The secretary of his father encourages him to continue his work of justice. Kouga tells him that he is working on a secret project of creating a powerful suit with military technology for him, which will protect him during his work for justice. Konoha went by Jin again. She tries to talk to him, but he wants her to stay away from him. After coming home, Jin finds the red-haired girl hiding in his house. Jin becomes angry and wants her to get out of this house. She explains the scenario that dangerous killer men are looking for her. They share a meal. She compliments him. She tries to ask him about him. Jin ignores her and doesn't want to build a connection. Suddenly, he goes outside and tells her to stay inside the house. She chases him and finds her lost bag. She grabs her bag and about to leave when one of the men from the killers appears behind her. He knee her down. She struggles to set free, but nothing works as the man is more powerful. Suddenly, Jin comes and demands 10,000 yen to save her. She is confused, but she somewhat happily agrees. The man attacks Jin, but he mesmerizingly counters and attacks him. Man converts to his original monster player form. Jin takes the activation gum despite activating some power and the man beats him up. while the subordinates of Mitsugai shoot the captured girl with a sleeping dart. Jin miraculously transforms into white and sets a new form when the player is about to kill him. Jin, with a new avatar, instantly kills him. Mitsugai is astonished to see this transformation of Zet. However, the scene is not sorted out yet because the player's main body has escaped. A man dressed in a white suit named Sweeper kills the player's main body because of a violation of their rules. The man belongs to Evol, an organization consisting of elite players. Jin reverts to his human form and takes the girl to his home. When Jin reaches home, he is backstabbed by the Sweeper. Meanwhile, Mitsugai is shocked to find the existence of Sweeper. CG intervenes and tells the Sweeper to stop because their boss will be angry over his death. Jin tries to ask questions, but he tells him that this is a secret. CG tells him that he is waiting for his final transformation and leaves. Tsugai and his men reach the site and are relieved to find Jin alive, even after encountering the Sweeper. Kouga visits the secret lab with his father's secretary. Kouga's team presents him with an extraordinary suit developed following the superhero Alpha suit. Kouga points out the mistakes in the design and asks them to modify it. Kouga thanked the secretary for his support. While going home, Kouga encounters a man who claims to be his fan. He tells him that he will support Kouga if he manages to clear some tests for a hero. He shows him a video of Konoha drowning in the school's swimming pool while her teacher stands still. He also shows Kouga 3 girls in danger who also happen to be his fans, and asks him who he will protect as a test. Kouga immediately left the school of Konoha, only to find her safely taking swimming classes with her teacher. Now we see a bar where the man is giving money to Konoha's teacher for her fake actions. The bar is actually a base of evil, and all people in the bar are elite players. Next day, Kouga sees the news about the murder of 3 high school girls, just like the man told him. He receives a call from that man who tells him that he failed the test. Kouga asks his secretary to locate this man to stop him from future murders. He receives a call from Konoha. She invites him in her plan of meeting Jin, but Kouga refuses. We see 2 players previously who escape from the battle with Jin. They are interrupted by Seiji. Seiji asks them to kill Jin. He also assures them that he will stop the Sweeper from interfering. They agree to kill Jin, who walks out with a red-haired girl to buy food. Jin encounters Konoha, who is surprised to see Jin with a girl. He leaves after having a short conversation with Konoha. Suddenly, Jin comes back because he feels that something is wrong. He comes to know that Konoha and her friend are kidnapped by some players. Those were the same players CG gave a contract to kill Jin. One of the men reverts to his player form and attacks him. Jin suddenly realizes that he has left the activation gum at home. Kouga receives a call from Konoha asking for help. Kouga equips the modified suit and leaves to save her. Jin sustained heavy damage during his fight with the player because he couldn't transform into Zet. Mitsubai and his team continue to track his stats for Zet transformation. Jin gathers his strength and lands a solid punch on the player. The other player tortures Konoha to the point she ends up in tears. Jin tries to save Konoha. After dealing some damage to the player, Jin enters an abandoned building and saves Konoha. While saving Konoha, the player attacks him. He pierces his weapon like sharp limb through him. Suddenly, Kouga appears in his alpha suit and defeats the player with his beam gun. He experiences another challenging situation as his helicarrier can lift up only 2 people, while there are 3 injured people including Jin. He carries Konoha and her friend to the helicarrier and sends them off upon constant pressure from Jin. Kouga explains to him that he has become alphas to serve justice. Jin tries to leave to kill the remaining players. However, he struggles to stand because of severe injuries. A group of homeless guys gather to fight the player in order to save Jin. Kouga steps in to save them. Meanwhile, Seiji comes out of nowhere and throws Jin into a room. Seiji knows all about Jin and how he's trying to transform into Zet. Seiji takes out a weapon made from the remains of the Ring of Exposure. He stabbed it in the chest of Jin, making him scream. Suddenly, a spark of energy emerges in Jin's ring, and it begins to glow, transforming Jin into Z. His body turns black and white, indicating the 3rd form, Intellispry. The transformation doesn't stop there. After a massive explosion, Zet achieves his final form, which is red and black in color. The forceful impact of transformation destroys the whole building. Zet's marvelous final form is seen. Seiji is excited to see him in his final stage. As Zet attains his final form, he rushes into a duel with the player who brags about raping and eating red-haired girl, Tanaka. Zet flashes his ring, making the player regress involuntarily. He's about to kill the player, but Seiji stopped him from doing so. Seiji urges Zet to kill the player. Seiji tells the player that he was only a bait to trigger Zet's transformation. Enraged, the player attacks Zet. Zet uses his razor-sharp limb to kill the player and his bud-like clones. The workers of Amagi Corporation monitor his transformation level. Suddenly, the alarms rings because of a continuous rise in the transformation process. On the other hand, Konoha's condition appears to be grim. Zed is infuriated by Seiji's treachery to his own kind. He points the ring of exposure at him. Seiji confesses that the ring is not harmful to him as he's different from other players and escapes. Serious. In a bar, the bartender is informed about Zet's red form. He tells the informer that humans might discover their identity. Meanwhile, scientists monitor the drop in Alpha's ability levels. Alpha is linked with Kouga's consciousness. Scientists praise Kouga for the courage he showed while saving Konoha. As the player and Kouga are fighting, Zet comes to save Kouga. Kouga is confused to see Zet there since he's unaware that Zet is Jin. Zet shames the player for following human orders. In the hospital, Konoha's friend gives a pendant adorned with a redstone to Yuko. Konoha's mother saying that they were making their way to return it back to Jin. Together, Zet and Kouga finish off the player while Jin reverts back to his human form. Jin is injured, while Kouga cries holding his childhood friend and praises Jin for defeating off the monsters all alone. Jin rushes home to see Tanaka. She is safe, thankfully. Jin hugs her and asks about her health. After saving Tanaka and knocking off the players, Jin and Kouga are praised by the locals for their bravery in saving their lives. Suddenly, two men in suits come and inform them that Amagi is waiting to meet them. Mitsugai apologizes to his grandson, Kouga, for finding out the truth of Jin in such awful conditions. Kouga asks his grandfather to tell the secrets regarding Jin and the players. Two of Amagi's men are investigating Tanaka about the experience of fighting in a hospital room. They tell her she's fine. Ro discharged the hospital. Bartender conversing with Seiji, who asks him for permission to handle Jin outside Tanaka's hospital room. Kouga sees Jin and says he knows everything about him. He tells Jin that he wishes to join forces with Jin to fight the players. Jin doesn't share Kouga's eagerness. Kouga takes out a drawing of Jin's red form and tells him that his final Zet form was inspired by an animation. He calls Jin the Zetman. They enter Tanaka's room where they are bombarded by questions for the greater goods. They deny knowing anything. As Jin's on his way to meet Tanaka, encounters Mitsugai, who tells Jin to break up with Tanaka. Mitsugai wants Jin to accompany him to the lab for some tests. Tanaka insists on coming with Jin, but he refuses. Jin tells her to return to her home, and Jin are in love. Tanaka says that she will wait for him. Tanaka reveals her first name is Hanako. Konoha watches the couple with a broken heart. Jin is plugged with monitoring machines. Mitsugai tells Kouga that Zet was the byproductive net HU an experiment on making non-human species. After the tests are concluded, Kouga asks Jin about his opinion on Zet. Jin says he embraced this path to serve humanity, so he doesn't care. Jin suddenly hears Kanzaki's voice and demands to know the whereabouts. Mitsugai takes Jin to a hidden vault. He is fascinated to see Kanzaki's severed head attached to machines. Mitsugai says that they took serious measures to preserve Kanzaki's knowledge, but in the process Kanzaki somehow developed consciousness. He wants Jin to ask his grandfather about the process of achieving full Zet transformation. Jin's own consciousness doesn't allow him to ask Kanzaki, so he decides to pull the plugs on his grandfather. Yuko gets a call from Kouga inquiring about the redstone pendant. Konoha tells Kouga that Tanaka has it unbeknownst to her. Seiji is listening the whole conversation through a hole in the ceiling. Seiji is plotting his attack, breaching the safety of Amagi household. The translucent player transforms into Jin and aggressively demands Tanaka to return his pendant. Hesitantly, Tanaka reaches toward the pendant. Along with Jin, the members of Amagi Corporation make an urgent entrance at the Amagi house. They confronted with two lookalikes of Jin with swords. One of them addresses Jin as a brother. He tells him that they were created from Jin's blood. Mitsugai tells that it's impossible to clone Jin's DNA. Dr. Sajira tells him that since Jin is still incomplete, clones can be created by his DNA. One of the clones tries to attack Mitsugai, but Dr. Sajira jumps to protect him. The sword pierces through his body. The clone again attempts to attack at Mitsugai, but Dr. Sajira jumps in again, this time taking the sword in his shoulder. Jin activates his transformation. He brings the ring of exposure to play, making the clones disintegrate. Kouga rushes to ask Tanaka about the pendant. Meanwhile, Sajira utters his last words. He expresses his wish to see Zet's complete form. Gyro holds the pendant in his hand while talking to Seiji on call, grinning as the Amagi house goes up in flames. While Hanako Tanaka is leaving her parents' house despite her mother's pleas, on the road she falls due to severe pain in her head. On a safe base, Konoha is terrified and demands answers from the scientist and her mother. who try to console her by giving her the same excuse of not knowing. Jin is going home when he encounters the bartender who seems to know about Zet. Jin furiously questions the man if he works for Seiji. Man chuckle, he reveals his identity as the master of Oval. Jin takes on a fighting stance. The sweeper is present behind him with his sharp sword, restraining him to do any movement. So the master of evil assures Jin that he wants to accompany with him. He wants to take down Seiji as he broke the law, off leading a quiet life and coexisting peacefully with humans. Jin agrees with his proposal by saying the enemy of my enemy is my friend. In the office, Yuko meets up with Sazu Amaji, who shames her for her attire, paying no attention to his words. Yuko asks her husband to prioritize the safety of his children. Sazu ignored her concerns by saying that he is the president of Amaji Corporation first and then a father to Konoha and Kouga. Ayami, the secretary of Sazu Amaji, informs Kouga that Alphas is to be sent to the headquarters upon Sazu's orders. Kouga angrily says that nothing less can be expected from his father. He resentful gives in. Suddenly, a man informs Kouga that Konoha is missing. Jin meets up with Hanako at his house. The two reveal their feelings for one another. Kouga gets a call from Jiro, who tells Kouga that he knows where Konoha is. Kouga arms himself and chips in a tracking device for the group of scientists to keep track of him. Ayami warns Kouga that it could all be a setup to catch him. Kouga says that until there's a possibility of saving Konoha, he must go. Meanwhile, Jin tells Hanako about how he made money by saving people to buy a house, as it was the wish of his grandfather. Hanako says that she wants to pay Jin for the time. He said to her, Jin affectionately says that she doesn't need to pay as she's family now. Suddenly, Kouga calls Jin, informing him about Konoha's disappearance. Meanwhile, Kouga meets up with Gyro. They drive off in a car when suddenly Gyro drugs him, making the tracking device go off the radar. Jin promises Hanako that when he returns, he let her know all his secrets. On the other hand, Kouga wakes up in a room with an earpiece attached to the back of his ear. Jiro plays with him, saying that if he wishes to find Konoha, he must first find Jiro. He enters a room filled with girls that are delighted to see Kouga. Then Jiro questions Kouga about who he will save, Konoha or the girls. Outside the room, Kouga gets in a fighting stance to take on the Hammerman. Meanwhile, Seiji appears on live television to disclose the existence of a vault. He commands the players to attack on humans as verification for his words. Kouga takes on the Hammerman. He starts to enjoy the fight. He finally puts an end to the Hammerman. Kouga asks Gyro to release the girls, and he does so by shooting a laser beam to slash open the girls, making them die. Mayo appears beside Kouga and says that she knows where Gyro is. Apart being skeptical, Kouga goes with her. He airs Seiji out. The involvement of the Amajis in creating the players, by revealing that players were simply made for sick pleasure. Jin saves the humans from Seiji's players, but the humans around him scowl and scrutinize him. They dump him a monster upon seeing him in his Zet form. Luckily, he's saved by the detective. Jiro and Kouga have a face-off. Gyro mocks Kouga's sense of justice and reveals his hatred from Amaji Corporation, and especially Seizu, because Seizu left Gyro and his son Ikaru to die in the lab where the players were created. In order to survive, he merged Ikaru with a player. Jiro proceeds to say that he aligned himself with Seiji to take down the Amajis. Amaji steps out from the shadows, and Kuba is flabbergasted to find Ayami conspiring with Seiji to rule over the Amaji Corporation. Ikaru also unveils his ability to control people by bugging them in neck. Meanwhile, Sazu holds a press conference with Mamoru to defend the name of Amaji, but he is unaware that Mamoru is bugged by Ikaru. In the middle of the press, Mamoru acts out and says that everything Seiji said was true, and then shoots himself. Ayami says that he will make Kouga a hero for the world after he kills his father. Furiously, Kouga uses his gun to shoot Gyro, Ayami, and Ikaru. Mayu comes out of her bug state because Ikaru is dead. They come out of the building where they're greeted by the scientists. The Alpha suit is ready to fight. Meanwhile, Seiji launches an assault on Sazu. Despite having a backup, Sazu is overwhelmed by the players. Jin enters in his Zet form, but is quickly overpowered by Seiji, who says he will help Jin achieve his full transformation. Disengaging the limits on Alphas, Kouga takes flight to defeat Seiji. Seiji pierces Jin with his mere fingers to increase his pain. If Jin wishes to save humanity, he must stab himself with a stake made out of redstone to achieve complete transformation. Seiji is about to stab Jin with the red stake. While interrupted by Kouga, Jin tells Kouga to get the stake from Seiji. Saizu orders Kouga to kill Jin, but to his dismay, Kouga points his gun at his father, calling him the root of all evil. Saizu orders his soldiers to finish off his son. Jin tries to stop Kouga, but his appeals are unheard. Yuko jumps to save her husband. but all in vain as the bullet goes past her, injuring Yuko and killing Seiji. Seiji asks Jin to stab himself so he can disembowel humanity. Kouga urges Jin not to do so, as he believes that the red stake is stained with evil. Jin goes ahead and impales himself anyways. When Seiji uses Hanako as bait, Jin finally achieves his mighty transformation, giving him the appearance of a titan, with red and black skin. Jin's ring of exposure gleams, giving the crowds headaches. Just then, Hanako transforms into a player. Seiji, now in his monstrous form, informs Jin that the ring of exposure causes the players to regress, ensuring that they never revert back to their human form. Jin is in disbelief to see Hanako as a player. Hakano is watching everything unfold with the detective by her side. Kouga valiantly battles the players. Seiji reveals that Hanako was a trap for Jin. He taunts Jin for the dreams he shared with Hanako. Jin gets a flashback. Of all the people that touched his life, he calls Seiji a liar and staggers to attack him. Seiji taunts Jin to kill Hanako as he was made to be the harbinger of death. Kouga's wicked sense of justice running loose. He uses his sword to finish off Hanako. Seiji mockingly thanks Kouga for bringing a callus. Jin, to the surface traumatized by Hanako's loss. Jin marches towards Seiji, who manipulate him to finish Kouga. He's the real enemy, piercing his hand inside Seiji's chest. Jin takes out Seiji's heart and crushes it, killing Seiji to his demise. Detective and Konoha watch Kouga unravel into madness. He retorts that Jin is no longer a hero, and as long as the ring of exposure exists, humanity will be a threat. So Jin must die. Jin says he doesn't care. Kouga points his gun at him, the sound of a bullet rings in the air. 3 years later, Alphys is making headlines as a hero who saves people from the players that quench their bloodlust by preying on them. Kouga works as the president of the Imagi Corporation. Mayo greets Kouga lovingly, and they talk about the incident that took place 3 years ago. Sui's flashback picks up from the fight between Kouga and Jin. As Kouga pulls the trigger, Jin appears behind him with the speed of light. Kouga tumbles back as Jin unleashes the might of Zet's charisma, gaining a tail and bat-like wings. In the process, the surge of power emitting out of Jin is felt by the leader of Evil in his bar. And by the sweeper, Jin is about to kill Kouga, but his merciful nature gets the best of him. He tells Kouga to keep his head up and disappears into the night. Kouga is about to go after Jin. He is stopped by Konoha, who tells him to fall back. Mitsugai also makes an appearance and tells Kouga to let Jin go, as Kanzaki's upbringing has made Jin compassionate towards humankind. The flashback ends, and we see Jin fighting off the players from the shadows, without any care for titles and praises from the world, unlike Kouga. Like this video.